Hello again, my children of the internet. It is, of course, Dr. Jimmy. Bob was here earlier. She is now over on the other side of the room licking herself. And if you could reach, you'd do it too. So don't judge. Anyway, I am now going to begin what I believe is part 6 of Horror Nights history for the year 2009, when the event was called Halloween Horror Nights 19, ripped from the silver screen. And I have described the first and begun to describe the second house in preceding videos. So I shall now continue with the second house, which is Dracula, Legacy of Blood. As I was saying, the house is filled with the brides of Dracula, and all sorts of brides, young and old, hideous and beautiful, and you go through various passages in Dracula's castle, up on the ramparts, down into the dungeons, the brides sometimes flying overhead like seagulls or flamingos or some sort of birds or bats, and bats probably more appropriate, flapping around up there, gliding around, like Sally Field. And then you go down into the dungeon pits where more hideous, disgusting old haggish brides are compressing human victims in gigantic presses that squish the body, squish, and the blood drains down into little gutters that pours into little pots and things that can contain for drinking purposes later, and all sorts of nifty vampiric things. But you rarely see the man himself. There's one scene near the beginning where he was, but it's rather dark and hard to see him. He is supposed to be there in all his gory glory in a scene near the end where all the coffins are laid out in a big coffin room. Original concept was that Dracula would appear behind the coffin in a half-human, half-bat-like form, and these enormous bat wings would open out, flap, these gigantic wings, and then, like flap, like that, and then there'd be this huge demonic beast with big wings, luring at you. But the problem was, it couldn't get the fucking wings through the little doors into the haunted house. The characters have to go in through the little entrances, and the doors they built to go into the scene, which was large enough for that, but the doors to go in weren't big enough, and they didn't want to cut holes in the wall to get the costume in, so they realized that was not a go. And so the wings went bye-bye, and Dracula himself was in there in a less bestial form. But he was in there to pop out, but he didn't have the big wings. And you saw him two more times just before you exited the house. So, although I like the Frankenstein house infinitely better, and I actually like several other houses that year better than Dracula, it got House of the Year. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the best House of the Year. The House of the Year award is given out to the house, in the successor award, the Street of the Year. They're given to the casts of either one house or one street that, for a number of reasons, including guest reactions and other things, but it's given to the cast. So the set design and the theme and this backstory, all that stuff that makes a house, in addition to cast performance, is not really that important to House of the Year award. So you can have a house that may be a bit lackluster in lots of ways, but the cast was on fire, and so they get that award. This year, for example, The Walking Dead might get House of the Year, even though a lot of people would say, "Oh my God, bite your tongue, Dr. Jimmy, not Walking Dead, not after 3 years in a row." But the cast in that house are dynamite. I have to say that. I really like the cast in that house, both A and B. I've gone through many times. But they have some contenders, because there are other casts this year that are pretty good too, especially in Giggles and Gore. They're quite good, and Roanoke and Halloween, and yet it was it seems to be hit or miss with AVP. From Dusk Till Dawn, the cast is very good, a couple, but again, it's one. I'm not sure if it's just one of the casts. There's one cast that's really good, the other one less so. I'm not saying which is which. I'll let them fight it out amongst themselves. But in the other one, in Dracula Untold and AVP, the casts are very good, but sometimes it's hit or miss. Sometimes the energy is high, sometimes it's low. So it's hard to figure out exactly who's going to win. There are other factors besides just the cast performances that are used for HOTY, which will probably be awarded sometime later this week, and then we'll know. But the two ones that I'm looking at myself, I'm not really making a prediction, but the two that I would think are likely to, one of these will be the winner, will be either Walking Dead or Giggles and Gore. That's just my own opinion. I'm often right, but not always. I called Forsaken, and In Between. I couldn't choose between those a couple years ago. They put it high, so that happened. I called the original Havoc Dogs of War, but I think last year I was off. So I'm not always right about this, and again, I'm not the one who picks the award. I'm just trying to guess based on my own impressions of the houses, going through them many times, which cast seems to me, and that includes both casts, seems to me will probably get the award this year, and I'm not sure this year, but those are the two houses that I'm looking at, and they might, but it might be another cast, because it's a pretty good year as far as cast performances will go. And of course you have to take into consideration some houses call for a more energetic approach and others less so. I mean, a lot of people in Dollhouse are just supposed to sit around in baby cribs and things, and they don't really have that running around stuff like some of the other, it's like what they're required to do is different. So you have to look at the performance in a different way. Or at least you should. But anyway. Oh, I've finished up with Dracula, but before I go to the third house, there was something I mentioned in an earlier video, which was Halloween Horror Nights 19, exactly how many nights and when was it held? Well, as a matter of fact, it was held on the evenings of September 25th and 26th. Just 2 nights in September, and then October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 21st, 23rd, I'm sorry, scratch that, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 28th, 29th, 30th, and the 31st Halloween night of 2009. It did not extend into November. It only ran 23 nights, which means that it didn't set any records. There had been previous events that had been at least 23 nights long. And so those were the nights that event was held. Important part of history that needs to be mentioned. So the third house of the event was the third and final house located in a soundstage in 2009. And of course, the trifecta, the unholy trinity of Universal Horror, Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman. In fact, Stephen King once referred to the trinity of horror in those very same terms. The undead thing, the vampire, the beast within, and the thing that should not be, the Frankenstein monster. You have, Dracula's represents sickness and plague, and the parasite, and the werewolf represents the fears we have of our own nature, and of course Frankenstein is even worse. He is that thing that is just so wrong because it's an abomination. It's the dead that should stay dead but comes back to life. So these are, in a way, the three primal things that have horrified humanity from the very beginning. The beast, the sickness, the dead thing that comes back, all of these primal horrors, and that's why we have Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Wolfman as the three most important parts of the Universal horror icons, the horror monsters. Others sort of fit into the same categories, whether it's Jekyll and Hyde can go in with the Wolfman, or the Mummy can go in the same category as Frankenstein, a reanimated corpse. You know, even the creature in the Bat Lagoon is like a beast, like the Wolfman is. You have those three being more primal, and the others are secondary in a way. So you have, of course, to really do the silver scream correctly, we want all three of the classic Universal monsters updated. And of course, although they did it all by themselves with Dracula and Frankenstein at Universal Studios Florida, there was one that was a tie-in to a reboot, and perhaps was the source of the whole idea in the first place. Tie-in to a classic, but not the way you think, as Roddy had said, and that is the Wolfman, because there was plans to remake and reboot the Wolfman franchise. Then a film to be released in 2009. It was originally released earlier in the year, and then it got pushed up to about October, right about when the event would be held. Perfect timing. But then it got pushed up again and didn't get released until January of 2010, which was a really bad sign, because that's sort of like the cinematic graveyard. You put a movie there in January or February because, yeah, it's just a bad, you don't put it in your tentpole, Christmas time, or, fall is good. Holidays and summer, it's because you think it's going to be a blockbuster, it can compete with the other big movies. You stick it in January or February because you just want to bury it and forget about it because it sucked. And so that we were afraid the movie might be a bit sucky. Our fears were somewhat realized, although I like the film. I think they're going to reboot it soon, because apparently Dracula Untold, now in cinemas, is the first of the, dare I say, Universal Monsters shared cinematic universe that they're planning to do now, almost in a sort of parody, now sort of imitation of, or in a way, actually way back in the day, Frankenstein met the Wolfman, and then we had films with them combining and going back and forth, although it disintegrated into Abbott and Costello in the end. They did sort of suggest the same universe, and so it sort of presaged the Marvel Comics thing, where you have, all these people together and become the Avengers. But in a way similar to that, we're going to have Dracula interacting with Frankenstein and the Wolfman, starting with Dracula Untold, apparently. There's something about the final scene of that movie. I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard something about that, which I've heard resembles another a certain recent Marvel Comics film from a couple of years ago that preset something on a similar way. I will have to see. Anyway. So, the Wolfman was attempted to be rebooted, and probably will be rebooted again in the near future, but there was a reboot at that time planned, starring Benicio del Toro. That's the actor who you have to say, what the fuck did he say? that's a sad thing about Del Toro. He has a yeah, exactly. And it makes it problematic when you watch the film. It's always sort of odd to me that you have the Wolfman. Of course, he was born in England, or in Wales actually, and then he goes to America as an adult for a couple of years, comes back and talks just like an American. Send him there when he's a little kid, he grows up in America, then like John Barrowman or someone, he could have an American accent, but he can still go back to his own accent if he wants to. Just like I can put on this fake British accent if I want to. But this guy, this actor, comes back to Wales and can't speak except like Lon Chaney. I never could figure that one out. It seemed weird to me. Anyway, so we have the guy in the movie, And the whole idea in the movie, there was a twist, and that was that Dad, who was played by Hannibal Lecter, is a werewolf too. Yeah, I spoiled it. Well, it's been, what, frickin' 4 years ago. You should have seen the damn thing by now. And it's time to go to the next part.